Usually when we picture a great leader, we conjure up this image of a knight in shining armor.
Oh, absolutely. Like the hero on the white horse.
Right, exactly. We think of someone who is fundamentally pure, honest, and just, unfailingly committed to doing the right thing.
Never compromising their morals.
Yeah, riding in to save the day. And it's a nice thought.
It's an incredibly comforting fairy tale, really. I mean, we deeply want to believe that good people naturally rise to the top of any hierarchy.
Because it feels fair.
Right, and that their inherent uncompromising goodness is the very thing that keeps them in power. We crave a world where morality just, well, always wins out over ruthlessness.
But then you actually look at the mechanics of history
Yeah.
or even modern power structures, and that white knight usually ends up, face down in the mud with a dagger in his back.
Yeah, and the person holding that dagger is usually sitting comfortably on the throne, smiling warmly, and just waving to a completely enamored, cheering crowd.
Which, honestly, sets the perfect stage for why you are joining us for this deep dive today. If you're listening to this, you are likely someone looking for the unvarnished truth behind complex ideas.
And you probably want it without feeling bogged down by dense historical jargon.
Exactly. So today, we are completely stripping away those idealistic fairy tales we are taught about leadership. We are diving deep into some fascinating source material, specifically excerpts from Niccolò Machiavelli's infamous political treatise, The Prince.
Alongside his historical accounts of some pretty ruthless figures like Cesare Borgia and Castruccio Castracani.
Yeah, so our mission today is to explore a radically pragmatic thesis. Machiavelli makes the controversial case that maintaining authority is not about being a good person in the traditional sense.
In fact, he'd argue that relying on traditional goodness is a vulnerability.
A massive one.
True power requires the deliberate use of perception, the strategic application of fear, and this relentless, almost theatrical control of one's public image.
It is a conversation that is going to completely challenge traditional morality. I mean, before we even get into the specific tactical playbook a ruler should use, Machiavelli demands that we completely shatter that foundational myth of leadership.
The idea that a good ruler must be a morally pure person.
Right. Let's unpack the psychology behind that first.
Well, early on in the sources, he points out what he considers to be a fatal flaw in human psychology. There is this massive, dangerous gap between how we ought to live and how we actually live.
Because people love to build these imaginary republics, right?
Exactly. Perfect utopias in their heads. And a leader will often try to operate based on how people should behave in a perfect world.
I'm trying to visualize the danger of that mindset in a real-world scenario. It feels a lot like stepping onto a basketball court for a championship game.
Okay, I like where this is going.
And you are the only person on the court refusing to foul while the entire opposing team has decided they are playing tackle rugby.
That's incredibly accurate.
You can point to the rulebook all you want, but you are just going to get crushed.
That analogy hits right at the core of his argument. Machiavelli says that a prince who insists on acting virtuously in a world full of people who are not good well, they will inevitably face ruin.
Because the game is rigged.
Right. If you neglect what is actually done for what ought to be done, you are engineering your own destruction. Therefore, he concludes, a leader must actively learn how to do wrong.
Learn how to do wrong.
And then use that knowledge according to necessity.
Okay, let me think through the implications of that. Because if a leader just openly embraces doing wrong, the line between a pragmatic leader and a tyrannical monster gets very blurry.
It does, yeah.
Doesn't this philosophy just give anyone in power a blank check to act terribly?
See, that is the crucial distinction we have to make here, because Machiavelli isn't advocating for evil for the sake of evil.
So no cartoon villains.
Right. He is not drawing up plans for a villain who just enjoys inflicting pain. He views leadership as a mathematical calculation of survival. If we zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture of statecraft, the highest moral duty of any ruler is to preserve the state. Chaos, foreign invasion, anarchy, those are the ultimate evils.
Because in those scenarios, everyone suffers immensely.
Precisely.
So the well-being of the collective completely outweighs the personal purity of the individual in charge.
Yes. If holding on to your personal moral purity causes the state to collapse, that so-called virtue is actually a massive failure of leadership.
Wow.
He writes that what looks like a vice, maybe a brutal crackdown or a broken treaty, often brings security to the whole population, while what looks like a virtue, like uncompromising leniency, brings destruction.
So personal morality basically has to be sacrificed on the altar of public stability.
That's the reality check, yeah.
That is heavy.
Hmm.
But if we accept that premise and traditional morality is entirely off the table, it begs a massive question about methodology.
How do they actually operate?
Right. A leader can't just stumble around acting viciously at random. The laws of man clearly aren't enough to survive.
No, they aren't. And to explain the actual mechanics of operating in that space, Machiavelli brings in this brilliant metaphor from antiquity. He points to Chiron the centaur.
The mythological figure, right? Half man, half beast.
Exactly. He tutored ancient Greek heroes like Achilles. Machiavelli asserts that a ruler must know how to use both natures, the laws of man, which are rational and civilized, and the force of beasts.
Because the first method is frequently just not sufficient to deal with corrupt human nature.
Right.
But he takes the beast metaphor even further, doesn't he? He doesn't just say act like an animal. He splits the beast into two very specific animals.
The lion and the fox.
Yes.
The beast has two essential sides, representing two distinct types of power. You must be a lion to terrify the wolves, meaning you need the brute strength to crush outright threats.
Okay, that makes sense.
But you must be a fox to recognize and evade the traps. Relying solely on the brute strength of the lion is a common, fatal mistake.
What does a snare or a trap actually look like for a leader? I imagine it's not a literal trap in the woods.
No. A snare could be a seemingly favorable diplomatic treaty that is actually designed to bankrupt your state.
Oh, wow.
Or it could be an alliance offered by a neighboring kingdom that intends to betray you the moment you drop your defenses. The lion cannot roar its way out of a bad contract or a poisoned chalice.
So you need the cunning of the fox to smell the trap before you step in it.
Exactly.
And part of being that cunning fox means being entirely willing to break the rules. He explicitly says that a wise ruler is not bound to keep faith, meaning they don't have to keep their promises if keeping that promise eventually harms them.
Because, again, he operates on the assumption that men are bad and will inevitably break their promises to you.
So you owe them zero loyalty.
Right. He brings up Pope Alexander VI as the ultimate example, claiming this pope did nothing but deceive people his entire life.
And yet, Alexander's deceits always succeeded spectacularly.
They did. And the reason he succeeded wasn't just that he was a good liar. It was because he deeply understood human simplicity.
I am trying to wrap my head around how someone gets away with that long term. I mean, if you are constantly breaking your word and acting like a sly fox, doesn't your reputation eventually precede you?
You would think so.
How do you lead if the public knows you are a chronic liar?
It seems totally counterintuitive, but it reveals Machiavelli's incredibly cynical yet historically accurate observation of human psychology.
Yeah.
He basically says, he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived.
Allow himself to be deceived.
Yeah.
That suggests the person being tricked actually wants the trick to happen.
Yes.
Why would anyone volunteer for that?
Because humans are overwhelmingly driven by their present necessities and desires. People are blinded by what they desperately want or need to hear in a moment of crisis.
We see this mechanism all the time, don't we?
Oh, constantly. Imagine a politician promising a struggling population that they will drastically lower taxes while simultaneously doubling public services.
The math never works. The voters usually know the mathematical reality doesn't add up.
But the promise alone relieves their immediate anxiety. It feels so good to believe it that they willingly suspend their disbelief.
You're right. The masses are reacting to their immediate emotional environment. They're not conducting a long-term rational audit of your integrity.
No, they aren't. If the fox tells them a lie that solves today's panic, they will eagerly swallow it.
That is painfully observant. But it still leaves a logistical gap for me.
What's that?
Okay, people want to be deceived in the short term, but eventually, the optics of being a manipulative beast catch up to you. A leader can't just be breaking promises behind closed doors forever without the public eventually sensing the corruption and revolting.
Right.
So how does a ruler survive the math of that eventual public backlash?
The solution to that problem is arguably the absolute masterpiece of Machiavelli's philosophy. It is the masterful manipulation of public image.
The theater of power.
Yes, the theater of power. He warns that it is actually injurious for a leader to possess and consistently observe all the good qualities.
Wait, to actually possess them is dangerous?
Yes, but it is absolutely essential to appear to have them.
Oh, wow. The illusion of virtue is far more powerful than actual virtue.
Exactly. You don't have to be good, but you must constantly look good. He outlines 5 specific traits a ruler must project at all times.
What are they?
You must outwardly appear to be Merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and most importantly, religious.
Religious being the ultimate trump card because it carries unquestionable moral authority.
Exactly.
He drops this incredible line in the sources. He says, men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, meaning everyone can see what you appear to be from a distance.
But very few people ever get close enough to touch who you really are.
Right.
And those few insiders who actually touch reality, who see the ruthless beast operating behind the curtain, well, they're trapped. They don't dare oppose themselves to the opinion of the massive majority.
Especially when that majority is backed by the terrifying majesty of the state.
Exactly.
Hearing this dynamic described, I can't help but compare it to modern social media influencers.
Oh, that's a perfect modern equivalent.
You see this play out constantly. Someone curates this flawless, philanthropic, highly moral feed. They are rescuing puppies, preaching kindness, projecting all 5 of those Machiavellian traits to millions of followers.
But behind the scenes offline, they are operating ruthlessly.
Yes. Stepping on people to secure brand deals, creating toxic work environments. The audience only judges by the eye, meaning the screen. They never get to touch the reality.
That translates the concept perfectly to the modern era. And what is fascinating here is the psychological mechanism Machiavelli identifies to explain why the audience accepts this illusion.
Why do you think?
He points out that the vulgar, which is his term for the general public, are always captivated by appearances and by the final outcome of an event.
So the end result sanitizes the entire process.
Completely. If a leader conquers and secures the state, or in your influencer analogy, becomes wildly wealthy and famous, the public will retroactively decide the means were honorable.
Perception literally overwrites reality.
It does. Human psychology struggles with cognitive dissonance. We don't want to believe that a terrible person achieved a great victory. So, if the result is a win, the crowd will invent a narrative that justifies how the leader got there.
The public does the PR work for the leader. That is brilliant.
It's very efficient.
Okay, so we have this beautiful, curated projection for the masses. The leader looks like a saint on a billboard. But eventually, a leader has to actually govern.
They do.
They have to pass laws, collect taxes, enforce rules, and compel people to do things they really don't want to do. A nice billboard doesn't keep a frustrated population in line.
No, it certainly doesn't.
So how does a leader manage that direct, emotional, physical relationship with the public?
That question leads us straight into the most famous dilemma in the entire text. When managing subjects directly, is it better to be loved or feared?
Machiavelli concedes that while it would be ideal to be both, they almost never coexist in reality.
Right. So if a leader is forced to choose just one, it is much safer to be feared.
He doesn't just toss that claim out there either. He backs it up with a rather bleak assessment of human nature.
He really does. Why is fear the safer bet? Because humans are, in his words, ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous.
Tell us how you really feel, Niccolò.
Right. But his logic is that love is an emotion held together by a chain of obligation. And because humans are fundamentally self-interested, they will snap that chain of obligation the second it benefits their own survival or wallet.
Because love is a choice they make,
Mm.
and they can unmake it the second it's inconvenient.
Precisely. Fear is an entirely different mechanism. Fear is maintained by a dread of punishment that never leaves them.
It's primal.
Yes. Love is dependent on the other person's goodwill, which you cannot control. Fear is dependent on your power to punish. You control the fear, they control the love. And a wise ruler builds the foundation of their power on what is strictly in their own control.
He illustrates this with such a striking historical proof, contrasting 2 of the greatest generals in antiquity.
Yes, Hannibal and Scipio.
Right. On one hand, you have Hannibal, who used what Machiavelli terms inhuman cruelty to keep a massive, incredibly diverse army perfectly united while fighting in foreign lands for years.
There was not a single rebellion in his ranks.
And then he points to Scipio, who was highly moral, an excellent, virtuous man by all accounts. And the result? His leniency caused his army to completely rebel against him in Spain.
The historical context there is vital. Scipio was actually upbraided in the Roman Senate by Fabius Maximus, who literally called him the corrupter of the Roman soldiery.
Oh, wow.
His easy, loving nature gave the soldiers too much license, and the vital discipline of the army fell apart. Hannibal's extreme cruelty was actually the secret virtue that kept his army alive, focused, and functioning.
I have to challenge this logic, though. I am trying to work through the reality of maintaining a state of terror. Doesn't leading by fear just create a massive pressure cooker?
What do you mean?
Well, if you squeeze a population too hard and terrify them constantly, you back them into a corner. And a desperate person backed into a corner isn't afraid anymore. They just become volatile. Aren't they bound to explode in a rebellion?
That is a highly perceptive point, and Machiavelli anticipates that exact danger. He draws a massive, non-negotiable hard line between being feared and being hated.
Okay, so there was a line.
A ruler must inspire fear, absolutely, but they must do so without ever becoming hated.
I am trying to imagine how you terrify someone without making them hate you. It seems like the moment you threaten my life or my freedom, I am going to hate you. Where does he draw that line between fear and hatred?
It comes down to understanding the difference between the two emotional states. Fear is a calculating, controllable emotion. When someone is afraid, they are doing a rational risk-reward analysis.
They stay in line because the punishment isn't worth the crime.
Exactly. Hatred, however, is an unpredictable, desperate emotion. Hatred causes people to stop calculating it. It makes them willing to risk their own lives and ignore all consequences just to destroy you.
So how does a ruler actively maintain that fear while avoiding the tripwire of hatred? Is it when you take away something they simply can't live without?
He provides a very specific, practical rule to prevent hatred. A ruler must keep their hands off their subjects' property and their women. He notes, with incredibly dark irony, that men more quickly forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony.
That is unbelievably bleak. They'll forgive the execution, but not the inheritance tax.
Exactly.
Why is property the ultimate charter for hatred?
Because property and wealth represent generational survival. You can execute someone's father for treason, and the son will be terrified of your power. That's the calculated fear you want.
Right.
But if you confiscate the family estate and leave the son financially destitute, you have threatened his survival and his identity. He has nothing left to lose, so he will hate you forever and scheme for your downfall.
Fear commands respect and obedience. Hatred invites conspiracy and assassination.
Perfectly said.
We have covered so many disparate pieces of this puzzle today. We have the cunning of the fox smelling out traps, the brute force of the lion, the curated illusion of virtue for the masses, and this incredibly delicate balance of maintaining calculated fear without triggering desperate hatred.
It's a lot to juggle.
I want to see all these pieces working at the same time. Because in theory, it makes sense, but the execution of balancing all that seems impossible.
It requires an almost superhuman level of emotional detachment, which is why the sources provide us with Machiavelli's ultimate case study.
Right.
To see this entire philosophy in motion, we look at his prime example of a successful new prince, Cesare Borgia, also known as Duke Valentino.
The story of Borgia in the Romagna region is incredible. Borgia takes over this territory, and when he arrives, he finds it is an absolute disaster. It's full of chaos, robbery, violence, and the local lords have basically been plundering their own subjects for years.
Total bloody lawlessness.
And we established earlier that chaos is the ultimate evil for a state. Borgia needs to bring order immediately. But he knows that bringing order to a lawless, violent place requires extreme, brutal violence in return.
Right, and if he commits that violence with his own hands, the people will inevitably hate him.
So he uses a proxy. He outsources the cruelty. He appoints a man named Ramiro.
A fascinating character.
Machiavelli describes Ramiro as a swift and cruel man, and Borgia gives him absolute unchecked power to pacify the region. Ramiro goes in and does exactly what he was hired to do. Through brutal severity, rapid executions, and iron-fisted rule, he completely pacifies the Romagna.
He brings the peace and unity that was desperately needed.
But here's where the trap closes. Borgia is a fox. He knows that Ramiro's necessary cruelty has generated a massive amount of simmering hatred among the local people.
The region is physically safe, but the population is traumatized and deeply angry at the man who oppressed them.
So to clear his own name, to harvest the love of the people, and yet still maintain their absolute fear of his power, Borgia has Ramiro executed.
Yes. One morning, the people of Cesena wake up and find Ramiro in the public piazza. He has been cut in half, with a wooden block and a bloody knife left right beside his body.
Which is just wow. That is the ultimate toxic corporate move taken to a lethal extreme.
It really is.
It's like a CEO bringing in a ruthless hatchet man consultant.
Yeah.
The consultant comes in, does all the brutal layoffs, cancels the bonuses, fires half the staff, and absorbs all the hatred from the employees.
All the dirty work.
Right. And then, once the budget is balanced and the company is saved, the CEO publicly fires the consultant in front of the whole company claiming the consultant was out of control.
The CEO gets to look like the moral savior of the workplace while keeping the profits.
Exactly.
That parallel captures the exact dynamic. What Borgia did in that piazza was the absolute pinnacle of Machiavellian artistry. Let's look at the psychological math of what he achieved. He secured all the benefits of extreme cruelty law, order, and regional stability without paying a single cent of the emotional tax.
Because he didn't bear the hatred.
He didn't. And look at the psychological effect on the crowd. Machiavelli writes that the barbarity of the spectacle left the people satisfied and dismayed.
Satisfied because the cruel man who oppressed them was dead, and they felt justice was served.
Right.
But dismayed or terrified because they suddenly realized the godlike power of Borgia, who could snap his fingers and cut the most terrifying man in their world in half.
He centralized the fear and outsourced the hatred. He manipulated the public's perception through a violent, highly theatrical display. He used the lion to kill Ramiro, the fox to deflect the blame, and the theater of power to look like a just, merciful ruler who was punishing a rogue minister.
He perfectly balanced gratitude and absolute visceral fear.
It's terrifying, really.
It is brilliantly dark. And it really brings us to the close of our deep dive today. We have thoroughly stripped away that fairy tale of the benevolent leader on the white horse.
We have.
According to these sources, true power isn't about innate goodness or moral purity. It requires the cunning to see the hidden traps, the strength to crush the wolves, the careful illusion of virtue, and the strategic, outsourced application of fear.
It ultimately demands a complete, uncompromising separation of personal morality from political necessity.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We want you to take this Machiavellian lens and apply it to your own world. Look closely at modern politics. Look at the corporate boardrooms, or even the subtle power dynamics in your local neighborhood associations or school boards.
Because once you understand these mechanics, you will likely start seeing foxes, lions, and Ramiro Dorco scapegoats absolutely everywhere.
You really will. You start to see the gears turning behind the curtain of every public relations campaign.
Definitely.
And we want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over on your own, something we didn't directly answer today, but builds on everything we've explored. In today's era, we are constantly told that authenticity and transparency are the biggest buzzwords in leadership.
Everybody wants to be authentic.
Right. Every article says we want a leader who is vulnerable and real. But considering the theater of power we just discussed, is it possible that our modern obsession with being authentic is actually just the newest, most sophisticated Machiavellian mask of all? Are we just demanding a new, modernized kind of theater?
That is a deeply unsettling question to consider.
Because maybe, just maybe, the hero on the white horse posting their authentic, vulnerable truths online is just a fox who figured out exactly what you needed to see to let your guard down.
And we all know what happens when the fox gets into the hen house.
Keep your eyes open. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.